The Business Review brings you top financial news developments influencing financial, global commerce, tourism, and other economic events from around the globe.
Senior United Nations officials and world leaders called for urgent action on biodiversity conservation at the UN Biodiversity Summit. Addressing the opening ceremony, Volkan Bozkır, president of the 75th session at the UN General Assembly, pointed on our ability to existence on Earth depends entirely on our ability to protect the environment around us. According to him, every year 13 million hectares of forest are lost, 1 million species are at risk of extinction, and in the last 50 years, vertebrates have declined by 68%. The United Nations General Assembly President called for a green recovery from the pandemic and said countries should create more jobs in this area and make the global economy greener. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for a greater ambition to reverse biodiversity. He was secured commitments that should protect our planet and have largely failed, but where effort has been made, he said, the benefits to our economies, human and planetary health are irrefutable. Nature is resilient, he added, and it can recover if we ease our relentless assault. Leaders from more than 100 countries, regions, and international organizations spoke at the summit and discussed how to set the goals of the post-2020 biodiversity framework and the means to achieve it.
Researchers estimated that nearly half of Argentina's population was dragged into poverty in the second quarter of this year by the brutal effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the country's long-standing economic crisis. Ahead of official government figures due later in the day, the Catholic University of Argentina, or UCA, and 47% by the end of June following months strict lockdowns to battle the coronavirus. UCA researchers Agustin Salvia said, "There is greater general poverty. We are all a little poorer. We already were last year, and now with greater inequality." He blamed the loss during the pandemic of 3.5 million jobs, mostly informal, for the rise, which was up from the 40.8% poverty rate recorded by UCA at the end of last year. The poverty line is drawn at 14,718 pesos, or $193 per month. According to the government's official statistics agency, INDEC, 35.5% were living in poverty in the second half of 2020. Reality. Garay, who works as a street vendor during sporting events and saw his livelihood virtually disappear under the pandemic shutdowns. Garay said while selling Argentines flags at a protest in the capital Buenos Aires that he survived because of family that supported him, because he had no possibility of doing anything. Argentina's economy contracted a record 19.1% in the second quarter versus a year earlier as the coronavirus crippled production and demand, and is on track for a 12% economic plunge in 2020. Small companies that produce for the domestic market were hit particularly hard as activity came to halt and businesses closed across the county for months beginning in March, driving unemployment up to 30%. Argentina recently struck a deal with its creditors to restructure about $65 billion in foreign debt and has a bumpy fiscal road ahead, sapping the spending power for social programs that could have helped alleviate the effect of the pandemic on the poor.
The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he was concerned about China's plans to extend its economic influence in Italy, while Rome promised to be on its guard as it developed new 5G technologies. The United States has repeatedly urged Italy, home to several large U.S. military bases, not to deepen ties with China, and Pompeo said he had reiterated the message at meetings with the Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio. Di Maio said Italy remained fully committed to its Western partners and understood the U.S. position. Italy raised hackles in Washington last year when it became the first the Belt and Road Initiative. However, the tie-up has yielded little economic gain thus far. Vatican officials expressed surprise late last week ahead of his planned visit to Rome. Pompeo published an essay in a conservative Catholic magazine that sharply criticized the Holy See for plans to renew a 2-year-old agreement with Beijing. Pompeo said the deal, which gives the Pope some say over the appointment of Chinese bishops, endangers the Vatican's moral authority. Vatican officials say that while the arrangement's not perfect, it's an improvement after decades during which Chinese Catholics who recognize the Pope were forced underground in China. Pompeo held talks on October the 1st with Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's top diplomat. But no such meeting was scheduled this time round.
The National Bureau of Statistics, or the NBS, said that the Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, for China's manufacturing sector came in at 51.5 in September, up from 51 in August. A reading above 50 indicates expansion, while a reading below reflects contraction. It is the 7th month in a row that the figure has remained in the expansion territory. Shi Zhahu, director of the Enterprise Performance Department under the National Bureau of Statistics Service Industry Survey Center, said the manufacturing indexes of 17 industries out of the 21 surveyed remained in the expansion territory in September, indicating strong economic recovery. The volume of import and export have both increased significantly so far in September, she said, adding that the sub-index measuring new export orders gained, while the one for import is 50.4, up 1.4 points compared with the previous month. She said, with a series of policies aimed at stabilizing foreign trade playing their roles, and with demand of the international market partially picking up, the export and import volume of the manufacturing industry has been further improved so far in September. The PMI for small businesses registered 50.1 in September, up 2.4 points compared with August, breaking a decreasing trend for 4 consecutive months.
In an upscale mall in Shanghai, lines from outside Chanel, Prada, and Louis Vuitton as shoppers trapped in the country due to the pandemic turned to their local luxury stores. Global luxury brands like Louis Vuitton, Prada, and Ferrari are facing e-commerce and holding in-person events for mainland Chinese. While Chinese shopper in recent years accounted for a big chunk of global luxury spending, the pandemic has made them an even more crucial clientele, as the Asian giant is the only economy expected to grow slightly this year. Luxury purchases in China quickly rebounded since it was the first to ease lockdown measures. Most brands reported double-digit growth for sales since the end of March, with Louis Vuitton and Prada, among others, recording 60% or more in June and July. For Prada, the group sales in China to date are well above last year's levels for the same period. Chinese cities like Shanghai are becoming a shopping hub for Chinese domestic tourists. Yang Lu, who's a 39-year-old Beijing resident who was shopping at Shanghai's IFC Mall, where brands such as Gucci, Dior, and Golden Goose have boutiques, is one of many Chinese nationals dissuaded by the virus from traveling. $1 billion luxury good market, with around 2/3 of purchases taking place when traveling abroad. This year, McKinsey & Company estimates China's consumers will make up to 50% of total purchases, but that'll not be enough to offset the lack of tourism in major cities in Europe and the United States.
This brings us to the end of this episode of the Business Review. We hope to see you again tomorrow with news of stock markets, economic conferences, commodities, currencies, regional and international financial news, and much more.